The energy in the auditorium was electric. A crowd of eager young conservatives filled every seat, their anticipation buzzing through the air. Cameras were rolling, lights were bright, and social media streams were already alive with chatter. This wasn't just another political event. This was a collision of intellect, ego, and ideology. On one side stood Charlie Kirk, the outspoken founder of Turning Point USA, sharp-tongued, confident, and always ready to provoke. On the other stood Ben Shapiro, the fast-talking conservative commentator known for his surgical logic and unrelenting debate style. Both were icons of the same political spectrum, but tonight the difference wasn't about sides. It was about substance versus spectacle. What began as a discussion about youth engagement in politics quickly transformed into a duel, not with fists or fury, but with words sharper than any blade. Setting the scene. A clash of confidence. The stage was set for what was supposed to be a friendly debate, a platform for two influential voices to discuss the challenges facing modern conservatism. But anyone who has followed these two knows friendly has a short shelf life when cameras are involved. Charlie Kirk, dressed in his signature fitted suit and confident grin, opened the session with his usual firebrand energy. He spoke of populism, of standing against elites, and of reclaiming freedom from government interference. His style was part preacher, part provocateur, a performance designed to resonate with emotion first and reasoning second. Ben Shapiro, meanwhile, sat patiently, hands folded, expression steady. He listened occasionally, jotting down notes, his sharp eyes betraying the calculations behind every blink. To Shapiro, politics was a chessboard, and emotion, while powerful, was just a pawn. For the audience, it was thrilling theater. Two men who often aligned ideologically, now walking the fine line between allyship and competition. Why this moment matters. On the surface, it might seem like a simple clash of personalities, but beneath it, this encounter revealed a larger truth, one that resonates far beyond conservative circles. In an era dominated by sound bites, social media outrage, and viral clips, political debate has become less about truth and more about dominance. Many speakers today aim not to explain, but to win. And that's precisely where the line between influence and integrity begins to blur. Charlie Kirk represents the new wave of populist activism, passionate, confrontational, and deeply emotional. His approach thrives in the age of TikTok and Twitter, where brevity and boldness often matter more than accuracy. Ben Shapiro, on the other hand, has built his brand on the opposite: speed, structure, and substance. His trademark phrase, "Facts don't care about your feelings," has become both his armor and his weapon. So when these two worldviews collided on stage, it wasn't just about who was right. It was about which approach, emotion or evidence, would command the room, the stakes behind the smiles. The first 20 minutes went smoothly. The crowd laughed at the jokes, applauded the quips, and leaned in for the next exchange. But underneath the surface, tension simmered. Charlie Kirk began pressing harder, framing questions meant to corner Shapiro, to challenge his intellectual dominance in front of an audience that adored them both. "You talk a lot about facts," Kirk began with a smirk, "but at some point, don't you think facts have to bow to reality? To what people feel and believe about their country?" The room went silent. It was subtle, but everyone knew what Kirk was doing. He was trying to shift the ground from logic to emotion, from Shapiro's stronghold to his own. Shapiro didn't interrupt. He waited, measured his response, and adjusted his microphone slightly, a telltale sign for anyone who's watched him debate before. It meant one thing: game on. The philosophy behind the fire. At its core, this wasn't about two men. It was about two philosophies colliding. Charlie Kirk's populism thrives on narrative, on connecting emotionally with the audience through passion and conviction. He represents a growing movement in American politics that sees authenticity and energy as the ultimate weapons. Ben Shapiro's conservatism, by contrast, is built on principles of logical consistency and intellectual rigor. His arguments are like puzzles, intricate, layered, and designed to withstand scrutiny. When these two forces met, it created more than a debate. It created a mirror for how we as a society consume truth. Do we listen to the person who speaks to our hearts, or do we follow the one who speaks to our minds? That question hung invisibly in the air as the discussion grew more heated. The tension rises. Kirk, sensing the audience's divided energy, doubled down. His tone became sharper, his gestures broader. He threw out claims about policy failures, about elites losing touch, and about the so-called intellectual class that Shapiro often represents. He was animated, confident, but increasingly imprecise. Shapiro, in contrast, remained calm. Every sentence he spoke landed like a strike, concise, factual, and devastatingly clear. The more Kirk spoke, the more it seemed he was digging himself into a rhetorical trap of his own, making. Viewers online would later describe it as watching a live masterclass in composure. But in the moment, it was more than that. It was a turning point. The calm before the storm, the media lens. Outside that auditorium, the story was already taking shape. Clips from the event were being posted on X, formerly Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube within minutes. The headlines ranged from "Kirk takes on Shapiro in explosive debate" to "Ben Shapiro faces friendly fire from within." Both men had loyal fan bases ready to defend their champion, and that's what made this debate so compelling. It wasn't left versus right. It was intellect versus instinct. Political commentators later noted that this exchange symbolized something much deeper happening in American conservatism, a growing divide between the emotional populists and the rational traditionalists. That division, though subtle on stage, was the silent character in the room, the promise of what's to come. Every story has a moment when the air thickens, when everyone knows something is about to happen. You could feel it here. Kirk, growing more animated, began to interrupt. He gestured broadly, talked over Shapiro's attempts to respond, and began throwing rhetorical traps, short statements that sounded profound but avoided precision. But Shapiro wasn't having it. He leaned forward, locked eyes with Kirk, and said calmly, "Charlie, that's an interesting emotional point. But it's not a factual one. Let's separate the two." The audience gasped. The gloves were off. And just like that, the debate shifted from ideas to dominance, from collaboration to confrontation. Why the audience couldn't look away. There's a reason people tune into these debates. It's not just to learn, it's to feel, to witness conflict, courage, and occasionally collapse. This wasn't about whether Kirk or Shapiro was right. It was about how truth is tested in real time, how words can build or destroy credibility in seconds. Ben Shapiro represented the fortress of preparation, years of refining arguments, understanding nuance, and defending logic, even under pressure. Charlie Kirk represented the fire of conviction, the power of passion, of energy, of reaching people emotionally before reason ever arrives. When those two forces collide, something fascinating happens. People start to question their own loyalties, not to personalities, but to principles. And that's what makes this story so important. It's not about partisanship, it's about the battle for integrity in public discourse, setting the hook for what's next. As the crowd buzzed and social media lit up, the confrontation reached a point of no return. Kirk's tone shifted from confident to defensive. Shapiro's responses became crisper, faster, more surgical. What started as a friendly exchange was now a duel of credibility, and one of them was about to be outmaneuvered in front of millions. The audience leaned in. Phones were raised. History, in a strange way, was about to be made, not because of who won, but because of what it revealed about modern debate itself. In a world full of confident fiction, it only takes one person with facts to change everything. The next moment would prove exactly that. The air in the hall began to thicken. What started as a conversation between two conservative heavyweights was slowly turning into something more, a subtle struggle for dominance cloaked in smiles and sound bites. The audience sensed it. Reporters sensed it. And perhaps most importantly, Ben Shapiro sensed it. The tension wasn't born in that moment. It had been simmering for months. Beneath the surface of conservative media, whispers had grown louder that the movement was splitting into factions, one driven by intellectual rigor and philosophical consistency, the other by populist energy and emotional appeal. Tonight, those two philosophies had names and faces, Ben Shapiro and Charlie Kirk, setting the stage for collision. Charlie Kirk entered the discussion with momentum on his side. His organization Turning Point, USA, had become one of the most influential youth-driven conservative movements in America. He was adored for his charisma, his accessibility, and his fiery style. He knew how to fill arenas, he knew how to make headlines, and most importantly, he knew how to connect emotionally, especially with young conservatives who wanted their politics to feel alive. Ben Shapiro, on the other hand, wasn't here to entertain. He was here to win arguments. He viewed logic as the ultimate equalizer, the antidote to the chaos of emotional manipulation that had consumed much of modern discourse. To Kirk, Shapiro was part of the old guard, too. Academic, too detached, too unwilling to speak the language of ordinary people. To Shapiro, Kirk represented a growing trend of loud without substance, the kind of politics that could ignite a crowd but crumble under scrutiny. And that's what made this event so volatile. A polite beginning turns personal. At first, both men were cordial. Kirk praised Shapiro's influence on young conservatives. Shapiro applauded Kirk's success in mobilizing students. But beneath every compliment was a thin layer of condescension, a subtle undertone that neither man missed. Kirk's tone sharpened. "You know, Ben," he said, leaning slightly forward, "sometimes the facts you talk about are so abstract that people feel disconnected from them. You can't win hearts with statistics alone." It was a challenge disguised as advice. Shapiro smiled faintly, and yet he replied without statistics, "All you have are feelings, and feelings don't build policies, they build chaos." The crowd reacted half with cheers, half with murmurs. The tension was no longer subtle. The energy shifts. The audience could feel the divide forming. Some attendees, mostly college-aged, nodded along with Kirk's populist energy. Others, older and more policy-focused, gravitated toward Shapiro's disciplined argumentation. It was like watching two different conservative Americas collide, one powered by fire, the other by framework. Kirk, noticing that some in the crowd were siding with Shapiro, began to push harder. He started interrupting more frequently, speaking over Shapiro's responses with phrases designed to hit emotionally. "See, that's the problem with Ivory Tower. Thinking, you can't just throw numbers at real people's struggles. The average American doesn't care about your citations." Ben. Each interruption drew reactions. The crowd wasn't just watching, they were choosing sides. But Shapiro, calm and measured, began, turning Kirk's emotional energy against him. "Ben," he said at one point, Emotion is not an argument. Passion doesn't equal correctness. You can feel something strongly and still be entirely wrong. It was a dagger wrapped in calm delivery, but sharp enough to draw blood. Kirk tried to recover by pivoting to populist talking points, invoking patriotism, frustration with elites, and distrust of experts. It was the same playbook that had won him standing ovations at dozens of college campuses. But Shapiro wasn't a student in an audience. He was a trained debater with years of experience, turning emotional rhetoric into intellectual rubble. Patriotism, Shapiro countered, is not about shouting the loudest. It's about understanding the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. The audience erupted, half in applause, half in discomfort. The pressure builds online. Outside the event hall, social media was exploding. Clips of their exchange were being shared in real time. Some users sided with Kirk. Finally, someone's calling out Shapiro's elitism. Others championed Shapiro. Ben just dismantled Charlie without breaking a sweat. The debate wasn't just happening in the room anymore. It was unfolding across timelines and hashtags. Every pause, every smirk, every counterpunch became viral fodder, and both men knew it. That awareness added another layer of pressure. They weren't just debating ideas. They were performing for millions. Kirk's misstep. Midway through the discussion, Kirk made his first visible mistake. Trying to corner Shapiro, he launched into a point about economic populism, arguing that data-driven conservatism had failed to resonate with working-class voters. But instead of providing specifics, he leaned entirely on rhetoric. The people are tired of think tank conservatives who don't live in the real world, he declared. They want leaders who feel their pain, not scholars who quote statistics from a desk. Shapiro nodded, then calmly replied, "Right. But feeling pain doesn't solve it. Emotion doesn't cut unemployment. Data does. Understanding markets does. Knowing history does." The audience went wild. Kirk's expression faltered only slightly, but enough for cameras to catch it. It was a turning point. The personal undercurrents behind the debate, there was mutual respect, but also unspoken rivalry. Kirk admired Shapiro's intellect, but resented his dominance in conservative intellectual circles. Shapiro respected Kirk's ability to mobilize young voters, but worried that his rhetoric was too reckless, too prone to distortion. Both men represented what the other lacked. Kirk had charisma, but lacked discipline. Shapiro had precision, but lacked warmth, and in that moment, both seemed to realize it. The crowd becomes the judge. As the discussion continued, the audience became more animated. Every response drew louder reactions. Every pause felt like suspense before a punchline. Shapiro's confidence began to feel like inevitability. He wasn't just answering questions. He was owning the rhythm of the conversation. Kirk, realizing this, started reaching. He moved from policy to personality, hinting that Shapiro's style was alienating people. "You talk fast," Ben, Kirk challenged. "Or do people really hear you, or do they just listen to be impressed?" Shapiro didn't hesitate. If you have to slow down the truth to make it palatable, it stops being truth. The room went silent, the kind of silence that hums with collective awe. The pressure breaks. By now, the stakes were no longer intellectual, they were personal. Kirk's jaw tightened. His body language screamed frustration. Every attempt to regain footing only gave Shapiro another opening. And yet, to Kirk's credit, he didn't back down. His passion, though outmatched, logically continued to rally parts of the crowd. That's the paradox of modern discourse. Truth can win the argument, but still lose the room. Shapiro knew it, Kirk knew it, and both men leaned harder into their strengths. The turning point. Toward the end of the segment, the moderator asked a final question. What's the single biggest challenge facing the conservative movement today? Kirk answered first. It's arrogance, he said sharply, glancing toward Shapiro. It's thinking you're too smart to listen to the people who put you there. A subtle jab, but unmistakable. When it was Shapiro's turn, he leaned into the microphone and said evenly, "The biggest challenge is confusing volume for value, thinking that yelling louder makes you right." The audience gasped. Then applause erupted. Kirk smiled tightly, trying to play it off, but the damage was visible. The final exchange before the explosion. At this point, both knew the climax was coming. The moderator tried to wrap up, but neither man was finished. Kirk leaned forward, gesturing passionately. "Ben, if conservatives keep prioritizing intellectual purity over real people's struggles, we'll lose the country." Shapiro's reply came swift and cutting. "And if we abandon intellectual purity for applause, then the country's already lost." The crowd went wild. Phones shot up to record the moment. That's when the silence fell, not awkward, but awed. Everyone knew they had just witnessed something bigger than an argument. They had seen two versions of modern conservatism collide, one grounded in feeling, the other in fact. Transition to the confrontation. As the moderator tried to close the session, you could feel that the story wasn't over. The tension in the room hadn't broken. It had crystallized. Charlie. Kirk looked like he had more to say. Ben Shapiro looked ready for whatever came next. And as one final question from the audience cut through the air, challenging both men, at once the stage was set for the defining moment. The real confrontation was about to begin. The tension had reached its breaking point. For over an hour, Charlie Kirk and Ben Shapiro had sparred over economics, philosophy, and the soul of conservatism. The audience had cheered, laughed, gasped, but now they were silent. Every camera was rolling. Every microphone was live. It was no longer about ideas. It was about who would own the moment, the question that changed everything. The moderator scanned the room for a final question, clearly hoping to, wrap up. But one hand shot up from the audience, a young woman with a notebook in her lap and conviction in her voice. "My question is for both of you," she said, her tone clear and firm. "If conservatism is about truth, then why do both of you keep framing it as a battle for power? Shouldn't it be about principle first?" The room froze. It was the kind of question neither could answer easily because it cut through their egos and straight into the heart of the discussion. Shapiro leaned forward, intrigued. Kirk crossed his arms, thinking. Then Ben spoke first. Ben Shapiro's response. The intellectual counterpunch. "You're absolutely right." Shapiro began his tone calm and professorial. "Politics without principle is just tribalism. The reason I focus on facts and logic isn't to win power, it's to keep power, morale. Because if we abandon truth to gain influence, we've already lost the foundation of what conservatism means." He paused, then continued. "Truth doesn't care about your emotions, your polls, or your popularity. It stands whether you believe in it or not, and if we sacrifice that truth to feel good or to fit in, we're no better than the people we criticize." Applause erupted, but Shapiro wasn't done. He glanced briefly at Kirk. "And that's why it's dangerous when people mistake performance for principle. Passion is great, but passion without knowledge is just noise." Gasps filled the hall. The comment wasn't subtle, it was a direct hit. Charlie Kirk's retort, the populist rebellion. Kirk's jaw tightened. He leaned toward the microphone, forcing a smile. "See, Ben? That's exactly the kind of ivory tower thinking that turns people away," he said. "You talk about truth like it's locked away in a textbook somewhere, but truth isn't useful if people can't feel it. You can't govern from a spreadsheet." His voice rose slightly. The audience, or at least half of it, began to cheer. Real conservatism isn't about winning debates, he continued. It's about fighting for the average American who doesn't have time to memorize statistics or quote Aristotle. You don't win people over with logic charts. You win them with heart. The crowd roared. For a moment it seemed Kirk had turned the tide, but Shapiro didn't flinch. He waited, hands folded, eyes steady, the calm before the counterstrike. The debate erupts. Charlie. He began, his tone firm, but even I understand the appeal of emotional connection. But if your entire argument relies on feeling, then it's not an argument, it's a performance. Kirk fired back immediately. And if your entire argument relies on data, then you're ignoring the people you claim to represent. Incorrect. Shapiro replied instantly. Data is how you understand the people you represent. Without it, you're just guessing what they want to hear. The moderator tried to step in, but it was too late. The debate had taken on a life of its own. The two began circling each other verbally, line by line, point by point. Kirk, you can't build a movement around statistics. Shapiro, you can't build one around slogans. Kirk, people don't vote for facts, they vote for who they trust. Shapiro, and they lose trust when they realize their leaders can't back up what they say. Every exchange drew louder reactions. The room wasn't just watching, it was vibrating, the moment of escalation. Then Kirk made his boldest move yet. Ben, let's be real, he said. You're great at debates, but outside of podcasts and panels, where are the results? How many people have you actually helped? My organization is out there every day on campuses, changing minds face to face. The comment hit hard. Gasps echoed across the audience. For the first time all night, Shapiro's expression hardened. He didn't smile. He didn't nod. He simply leaned in and said quietly, almost coldly, Charlie, your organization has done good work, but let's not pretend that volume equals virtue. The audience erupted. Some cheered, others booed. The divide was total. Shapiro continued, his voice sharp as a scalpel. You don't need to be everywhere to make a difference. Sometimes changing one mind with reason is worth more than changing 100 with noise. Kirk's face tightened. He wasn't done yet. Charlie's counterattack. Easy to say when you've never been on the ground, Kirk snapped. You don't see what students deal with. You don't face the woke mobs, the protests, the chaos. It's easy to talk about logic when you're not the one being shouted down. Shapiro nodded. And it's easy to play the victim when you run from facts. The line hit like a thunderclap. Kirk's supporters booed. Shapiro's supporters cheered. The moderator's voice rose. Gentlemen, let's... But neither man was listening. Kirk gestured to the crowd. You see what I mean? This is why people think conservatives are out of touch. We argue with each other instead of uniting. While we debate, the left wins. The culture, Shapiro shot back. They win the culture because too many on the right think shouting louder is a substitute for thinking deeper. The hall was chaos now. Applause, jeers, shouts, flashes from a dozen cameras. And then, as if sensing the need for a decisive moment, Shapiro delivered the line that would echo across the internet, the line that broke the room. He looked directly at Kirk, eyes steady, tone unshaken. Charlie, facts don't care about your feelings, but lately it seems like you care more about feelings than facts. For a second, silence. Then, an explosion, gasps, applause, shouts. It was the kind of line that cuts straight to the bone. Elegant, simple, devastating. Kirk froze for a heartbeat, visibly taken aback. He recovered quickly, forcing a laugh. Yeah, Ben, that's a great slogan. Maybe put it on a mug. Shapiro smirked. I did. It sold out. The crowd lost it. Even the moderator couldn't hide a smile. The crowd reaction. From that point, the energy shifted decisively. The audience, even those who had come to support Kirk, seemed to recognize that Shapiro had seized control. Every attempt by Kirk to regain footing only drew mixed reactions. Every calm, Rebuttal from Shapiro landed harder. Kirk's pacing grew restless. His hands moved more aggressively. He started talking faster, a mirror image of Shapiro's usual style, but without the precision. Meanwhile, Shapiro's demeanor was pure control, seated, measured, eyes locked. He didn't need to overpower Kirk. He let Kirk overpower himself. The room wasn't just listening anymore. It was watching the hierarchy shift, the viral moment. Within minutes, clips were being posted online. The exact line: "Facts don't care about your feelings, but lately you seem to care more about feelings than facts." Spread like wildfire. Commentators called it the intellectual knockout. Memes flooded Twitter and Reddit. Hashtags like Shapiro vs. Kirk and Facts Win Again began trending. For Shapiro, it was another addition to a long list of viral debate victories. For Kirk, it was a lesson, harsh but necessary, in how quickly confidence can crumble under logic. But to both men, the night wasn't over yet. The unexpected turn. After the thunderous applause faded, the moderator finally regained control. "Gentlemen, final thoughts." Kirk took a deep breath. His tone softened. "Look," he said, "I respect Ben. I really do. We both want what's best for the country. We just have different ways of getting there. He believes in logic first. I believe in people first. Maybe somewhere in the middle is where conservatism needs to live." The audience applauded, a mix of relief and respect. Then Shapiro spoke. "And that's fair. But if the middle means compromising truth to make it more comfortable, then I'll stay where I am." Another ripple of applause, and just like that, the storm quieted. Both men smiled, shook hands, and nodded for the cameras, but everyone in that room knew what had just happened. This wasn't just a disagreement, it was a defining moment, a glimpse into the ideological tug-of-war shaping an entire generation of conservative thought. After the event, backstage, things were quieter. Kirk leaned against a wall, checking his phone, already filled with notifications. Comments and headlines. Some praised him for standing his ground. Others mocked him for being Shapiro'd. Ben walked past, nodded politely, and said, "Good debate." Kirk forced a grin. "Yeah, good debate." They both knew the truth. One had won the night, the other had learned from it. But in a deeper sense, both had done something rare. They'd forced their audience to think that confrontation wasn't just about ego. It was a mirror reflecting the growing divide in modern discourse. Shapiro represented the belief that logic and principle must guide action. Kirk embodied the belief that emotion and connection drive momentum. Both are essential, but when one dominates without the other, truth itself becomes collateral damage. And that ultimately is why this moment mattered, because in that single exchange, in that one silent second after Shapiro's devastating line, everyone watching was reminded of something crucial, that in the age of viral outrage and emotional politics, facts still matter. That passion is powerful, but only when grounded in truth. As the lights dimmed and the audience filed out, conversations buzzed through the air. Clips spread online, headlines formed, and the internet divided once again. Some saw Shapiro's victory as a triumph of intellect. Others saw it as proof that the movement was eating itself alive. But one thing was certain: nothing would be the same. After that night, the fallout was only beginning. The moment the debate ended, the internet ignited like dry brush under a lightning strike before Ben Shapiro had even left the stage. The clip of his closing line, "Facts don't care about your feelings, but lately you seem to care more about feelings than facts," was already circulating across X, formerly Twitter, YouTube Shorts, and TikTok. Within hours, millions had seen it by sunrise. It was the #1 trending topic in political discourse online. Commentators, influencers, and even comedians jumped in. Shapiro just turned Kirk into a case study on confidence collapse. Charlie went for the crowd, Ben went for the truth, and truth won. This is the conservative civil war playing out in real time. It wasn't just a viral moment. It was a cultural moment. For years, both men had represented competing visions of the same movement, one built on logic, the other on populist energy. But now, for the first time, that tension had been exposed for the world to see, and it wasn't pretty. By the next morning, the headlines were everywhere, and depending on who you read, you'd think two entirely different events had taken place. Mainstream outlets framed it as another sign of fragmentation within the conservative base. Right-leaning publications, however, were split right down the middle. Some sided with Shapiro, calling him the guardian of intellectual conservatism. Others defended Kirk as the voice of the people. Cable news took it even further on. Fox panels debated whether the exchange represented healthy discourse or public division. On MSNBC, anchors chuckled that even conservatives are getting tired of their own talking points. It was chaos, not because anyone knew what it meant, but because everyone wanted to claim what it meant by midday. Charlie Kirk had taken to X to address the moment head-on. He tweeted, "Debates are meant to challenge ideas. I'll never apologize for fighting with passion for the future of this country. I respect Ben, but passion matters too." The post was liked over 50,000 times within hours, but the replies told a different story. Some fans rallied behind him. "Charlie, don't let the elites bully you. You speak for the people." Others were less kind. "You got crushed. Facts matter. Take the L." Gracefully later that evening, Kirk released a short video statement. He appeared calm, though the fatigue showed. "Look, I've got nothing but respect for Ben," he said. "He's one of the sharpest minds in the movement. But here's the truth. We're not going to win hearts just by winning arguments. We need to connect. We need to care, if that makes emotional. Fine, I'll take that." It was a strategic move, reframing defeat as authenticity, and in a way it worked. His core audience doubled down in support, turning his loss into a symbol of relatability. Meanwhile, Ben Shapiro didn't post anything for nearly 24 hours, which in the modern political cycle is an eternity. His silence only fueled speculation. Then finally a single post appeared: "Debate ideas, respect opponents, value truth." That's it. It was simple, controlled, classic Shapiro. His team later uploaded the full debate to YouTube with a precise title: Facts versus Feelings. The debate between Ben Shapiro and Charlie Kirk. Within 48 hours, it had 5.3 million views. Comments poured in. This is how discourse should look. Ben just gave a masterclass in controlled debate. Charlie came for claps. Ben came for clarity, while Kirk fought to reframe the narrative. Shapiro didn't have to. His words had done that for him. The fallout wasn't just about two personalities. It was about what they represented. Older conservatives largely sided with Shapiro. To them, his calm logic reflected the discipline of traditional conservatism, Reagan-era rationality over modern emotion. Younger conservatives, however, resonated with Kirk's populist fire. They saw themselves in his frustration, his energy, his willingness to fight, even if imperfectly on social media. That divide took on a life of its own. Team, Ben versus team. Charlie, facts first, versus feel. First memes, TikTok edits with dramatic music and split-screen quotes. The internet had turned an ideological disagreement into digital tribalism. But behind the memes, something deeper was happening, a realization that the conservative movement was fighting not against the left, but within itself. Political analysts and communication experts jumped in almost immediately. Dr. Laura Kent, a media psychologist, wrote, "What we saw between Kirk and Shapiro wasn't just a debate. It was a psychological collision between rational persuasion and emotional resonance. Shapiro's precision appeals to the intellect, but Kirk's relatability appeals to the identity. Both are vital, but when they clash, intellect usually wins. In the short term, emotion wins in the long run. Others echoed the same thought, that this debate symbolized the future of the right, not in politics but in method. One viral post summarized it best. Shapiro won the debate. Kirk won the crowd, but the crowd changes faster than the truth. A producer who worked on the event later revealed that even the crew felt the tension escalate in real time. You could feel it, he said. Ben's control was surgical. Charlie started strong, but once Ben hit that line about feelings, it shifted. Everyone backstage just froze. It was like watching a wave hit a wall. Another source claimed that Kirk's team was visibly frustrated afterward. One aide reportedly said he walked right into Ben's rhythm, exactly what we told him not to do. Meanwhile, Shapiro's staff celebrated quietly, knowing the viral clip would dominate headlines. But even they seemed aware that this wasn't just about one win, it was about defining what winning even meant anymore. By the end of the week, the dust began to settle. Late-night shows referenced the debate. Podcasts broke it down line by line. Even apolitical creators used the clip to discuss how emotional arguments collapse under pressure. And through it all, one thing became clear. The confrontation had struck a nerve, because it mirrored the national conversation itself. In an age where emotion often trumps evidence, seeing facts prevail felt revolutionary, but at the same time many sympathized with Kirk, because emotion, after all, is what makes politics human. That paradox is what kept the story alive. Days later, both men moved on, at least publicly. Shapiro returned to his usual programming, subtly referencing the event as an example of why facts matter in the age of outrage. Kirk, meanwhile, announced a new campus tour titled Hearts and Minds Winnin'. Both the titles alone told the story. Each had walked away convinced of his own lesson. Each had captured a different half of America's attention. But beyond the memes, the trends, and the tweets, something deeper lingered. This wasn't just about a viral debate or a power clash between two conservative figures. It was about a question that cuts to the core of modern discourse. When truth and emotion collide, which one leads? The answer, as it turned out, would define more than just that night. It would shape how millions think, argue, and choose who they believe. Because as the world argued over who won, one truth stood tall. Facts may not always win the moment, but they always win the meaning in the chaos of social media reactions, trending hashtags, and video edits. It was easy to forget something crucial. This moment wasn't just about two men arguing on stage. It was about what that clash represented for modern discourse. When Charlie Kirk tried to outsmart Ben Shapiro, he wasn't just debating an opponent. He was stepping into an arena where emotion meets logic, conviction meets evidence, and performance meets preparation. That tension isn't new. It's the story of every generation trying to decide what kind of truth it believes in. Shapiro's calm, data-driven precision symbolized a return to reason in the age of noise. Kirk's passion and energy represented the power of emotion in connecting with people. The collision between them exposed a truth. Our culture often forgets. Facts matter, but how we deliver them matters too. When the spotlight hits, most people rely on passion. Few rely on preparation. And that's what separated this moment from every other viral debate. Ben Shapiro didn't just win because he was smarter or sharper. He won because he was ready. He anticipated Kirk's arguments, prepped counterpoints, and studied the data behind every claim. It wasn't luck, it was discipline, and that's the lesson that outlives the applause. Preparation isn't about knowing what's coming. It's about being ready for anything. In an era where people equate confidence with competence, This debate was a rare reminder that knowing your facts is still the ultimate power move. Kirk's confidence couldn't shield him from the precision of Shapiro's reasoning, and for millions watching it became a wake-up call that in a world obsessed with speed and soundbites, depth still wins the debate, distilled a truth as old as democracy itself. People often choose what feels true over what is true. Charlie Kirk represented the modern rhetorical trend, blending conviction, emotion, and crowd energy to sway opinion. He wasn't lying, he was connecting, but that connection came at a cost. He underestimated the quiet surgical strength of facts. Ben Shapiro, on the other hand, embodied a timeless ideal that in the end, data and discipline outlast applause. His composure under pressure reminded viewers of something politics has almost forgotten, that the person who stays calm, focused, and informed doesn't just win the argument, they win credibility. That's the power of truth in action. It doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just refuses to flinch. Millions of viewers weren't just watching Shapiro and Kirk. They were watching themselves. The debate mirrored a daily struggle most people face, whether at work, online, or in family discussions. How do you deal with someone who's louder, faster, and more emotional than you do? You meet passion with passion, or do you stay grounded in reason? That's why this story spread far beyond politics. It wasn't about conservatism or ideology. It was about communication, truth, and power. It showed that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's measured in restraint. There's a reason. The moment left everyone silent because deep down, everyone recognized what they had just seen. The rare victory of clarity over chaos. When Shapiro calmly dismantled Kirk's argument, it wasn't just a debate move, it was a cultural signal. It reminded the world that facts still have force even when they're inconvenient, uncomfortable, or unpopular, and in that silence after the applause faded, something shifted. People remembered that logic isn't boring, it's reliable, that calm isn't weakness, it's control, that truth isn't always loud, it's lasting. In a time when outrage is monetized and division is celebrated. This debate stood out as a masterclass in what happens when reason fights back. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't polite, but it was powerful because moments like this remind us that truth isn't fragile, it's just forgotten. And every time someone like Ben Shapiro holds their ground against a tidal wave of rhetoric, it gives that truth another chance to stand tall. As the custom quote says, democracy isn't a spectator sport. It survives only when ordinary people defend the truth. And on that night in that room, truth had a defender, and the world noticed. Here's the thing, this debate wasn't just between Charlie Kirk and Ben Shapiro. It was between two ideas that live inside all of us. The first idea says, if I sound confident enough, I'll win. The second says, if I stay informed enough, I'll last. Watching the moment unfold wasn't just entertainment. It was a reflection of how we argue, discuss, and search for truth in a world that rewards noise over nuance. Think about it. How many times have you seen someone win an argument online simply because they were louder, faster, or more aggressive, not because they were right? That's what makes this story hit deeper than a viral clip. It's not about political sides, it's about personal truth. Maybe you've been in a similar spot, sitting in a class at a dinner table, or scrolling through social media, watching misinformation spread like wildfire. You see people twisting facts, talking over others, and turning discussion into performance. It's exhausting, right? And yet it's everywhere. That's why this debate matters. It wasn't just a political showdown, it was a mirror showing us how easily truth can be drowned out when confidence takes the mic. Ben Shapiro's calm dismantling of Kirk's argument wasn't just impressive, it was instructional. He didn't yell, he didn't mock, he didn't match emotion with emotion. He did something far more powerful. He listened, paused, and responded with facts. Imagine what our conversations online or in person would look like if more people did that. This is where you come in. Ask yourself, how often do I fact-check before forming an opinion? Do I argue to win or to understand when I see something that sounds right? Do I pause to see if it is right? The truth is, every viewer becomes part of the story. The moment they engage with it, you don't need a microphone or a debate stage. Your comment, your post, your voice matters. The internet runs on repetition. If falsehoods can go viral, so can facts. That's why stories like this shouldn't just be watched. They should be used as reminders that preparation beats performance, that knowledge beats noise, that truth, even when quiet, can still echo louder than lies. Imagine a culture where people don't just share clips, they share context, where debates don't end in insult threads, but in thoughtful dialogue where people say, "I didn't know that," instead of "you're wrong." That's not naive. It's necessary, because democracy doesn't die when people disagree. It dies when they stop thinking, and thinking starts small, with moments like this one, with someone watching a debate and realizing, wait, maybe I should slow down before I share that headline. If more people did that, paused, questioned, checked, our collective understanding would shift overnight. The noise would fade. The truth would breathe. Here's something powerful to consider. Viewers shape the outcome of every public debate. When the audience rewards drama, performers win. When the audience rewards clarity, thinkers win. You have more influence than you think. Every time you engage with content that values truth over outrage, you help build a digital ecosystem that rewards integrity instead of impulse. So maybe the real takeaway from the Shapiro-Kirk moment isn't who won. Maybe it's this: we all get to decide what kind of world wins next. So now let's bring it back to you. What do you think this moment says about the way we handle truth in public discussions? Do you think confidence should ever outweigh evidence? Have you ever caught yourself believing something just because it sounded convincing? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Share your take, not as a spectator, but as a participant, because this conversation doesn't end when the video does. It continues every time someone like you decides to value understanding over applause. The world doesn't need more noise, it needs more listeners, it needs more people willing to slow down, think deeply, and speak truth even when it's inconvenient. And maybe that's the real legacy of this debate. Not a viral moment, but a reminder. The loudest voice in the room isn't always the most powerful. The most informed one is. When the debate ended, the silence in that room spoke louder than any closing statement could. Charlie Kirk's attempt to outmaneuver Ben Shapiro wasn't just a clash of ideas. It was a clash of approaches to truth. One side relied on confidence and charisma, the other relied on preparation, precision, and principle, and that's why this moment matters. Not because one person won, but because it showed how truth wins when it's given a chance to speak. Ben didn't need volume, he had verification. He didn't need applause, he had accuracy. That's the power of being prepared. The quiet strength that doesn't seek validation but earns it. Here's the truth. Debates like this happen every day. Not on TV, but in classrooms, workplaces, comment sections, and family dinners. We all face moments where misinformation tries to corner us, where emotion threatens to override evidence in those moments. What matters most isn't how loud we are, it's how informed we are. This exchange between Kirk and Shapiro reminds us that facts don't need to shout, they just need to stand firm. So the next time you find yourself in a discussion that feels impossible, remember this scene. Remember that silence after Shapiro's response, not as an ending, but as a turning point. A moment when truth didn't need permission to win. If you've made it this far, you're not just watching, you're thinking. And that makes you part of something bigger. Here's your challenge. Don't let this be just another viral clip that fades by tomorrow. Let it be a reminder that your curiosity is power. Be the person who checks the source. Be the person who reads past the headline. Be the person who values logic over loyalty. Because when enough of us do that, we change what winning looks like. Not just in politics, but in culture, education, and everyday life. We live in a time when performance often overshadows principle. But every once in a while, a moment like this cuts through the noise and reminds us that substance still matters. So don't just be an audience member, be an advocate for truth. Share, discuss, question, but never stop thinking. Because in the end, democracy doesn't defend itself. That's our job. The question is, will you be ready when your moment comes?